Campaigning in Ohio today, Mitt Romney told a story he has recently become very fond of telling on the campaign trail. It's about a young man he met once at a party.
One was a former Navy SEAL, and Glenn Doherty, we chatted for a while. He came from Massachusetts, where I'd been governor, and had family there. He also had skied in some of the places, snow skiing, that I had found during the Winter Olympics in Utah that I'd skied at, and we had a nice chat together.
The man Mr. Romney is talking about there is Glenn Doherty. Glenn Doherty is the former Navy SEAL who was one of the 4 Americans killed in the attack on the American consulate in Benghazi in Libya in September. Mr. Romney told that same story about meeting Mr. Doherty. He told it again yesterday while he was campaigning in Iowa.
He skied a lot. He skied in some of the places I had, and we had a lot of things in common. He told me that he keeps going back to the Middle East. He cares very deeply about the people there. You can imagine how I felt when I found out that he was one of the 2 former Navy SEALs killed in Benghazi on September 11th. And it touched me, obviously, as I recognized this young man that I thought was so impressive. He, according to the reports on CNN International that I read, he was actually in a different building, in an annex, a safe place somewhere else across town, when he and his colleagues there heard that the consulate was under attack. And they went there. They didn't hunker down where they were in safety. They rushed there to go help. This is the American way. We go where there's trouble. We go where we're needed. And right now we're needed. Right now the American people need us.
Politicians repeat the same stories on the campaign trail all the time. That is not what is uncomfortable making about what Mr. Romney is doing here. It's not the repetition that is the issue. Well, part of the problem is Mr. Romney equating his running for office with the bravery Mr. Doherty had displayed trying to save lives in the face of the armed attack in Benghazi. Right now, the American people need us, he said. After talking about all these other things that he had in common with Mr. Doherty, like Massachusetts and skiing, he compares what he's doing now with what Mr. Doherty did in Benghazi.
They didn't hunker down where they were in safety. They rushed there to go help. This is the American way. We go where there's trouble. We go where we're needed. And right now we're needed. Right now the American people need us.
If you think it takes the same kind of bravery for this guy to run for president as it was brave of this former Navy SEAL to respond the way he did to an RPG and mortar attack in Libya, then this was maybe an inspiring moment for you in Iowa. Otherwise, it is probably something else. Since it's become clear that this was going to now be a repetitive standard part of Mr. Romney's stump speech, Glenn Doherty's friends and family have begun speaking out against Mitt Romney and the Romney campaign for using Mr. Doherty on the campaign trail in this way. An old friend of Mr. Doherty's gave an interview to a Seattle radio station yesterday, giving what he said was Glenn Doherty's take on that meeting he had with Mr. Romney at that party. His friend said Mr. Doherty told him that Mr. Romney kept introducing himself to Doherty over and over again, forgetting that he had just met him, and that Mr. Doherty found that pathetic.
I think the ultimate count by the end of the night was 4 times. Romney actually approached him using this private gathering as basically a political venture to further his image. And Glenn just believed it to be very insincere and stale. You know, he said it was pathetic and comical to have the same person come up to you within only, a half hour, reintroduce himself to you, having absolutely no idea whatsoever that he just did this 20 minutes ago and did not even recognize Glenn's face, whether it be Republican, Democrat, Green Party, Libertarian, it doesn't make a difference. This guy is using our great friend, our humble and honorable great friend that we know is just a regular guy who is truly larger than life. He has become an actual part of the soapbox routine for politics in a presidential race. I think Glenn would feel more than anything almost embarrassed for Romney. I think he would feel pity for him.
I should also note that Glenn Doherty's mother, Barbara, has released a statement to a local Boston TV station. Quote, "I don't trust Romney. He shouldn't make my son's death part of his political agenda. It's wrong to use these brave young men who wanted freedom for all to degrade Obama." After Mr. Romney persisted in telling the story about Glenn Doherty yet again after that statement from Mr. Doherty's mother was released, a reporter at BuzzFeed today pressed the Romney campaign about whether or not Mr. Romney was going to keep this as part of his stump speech despite the objections. Then the campaign relented, saying Mr. Romney had been inspired by that meeting, but, quote, "We respect the wishes of Mrs. Doherty, though." Since before the attack was even over in Benghazi, the Romney campaign has tried and tried and tried to make some political hay out of it, to take political advantage of the fatal attack on the American consulate in Libya. It started before the attack was over, before American deaths had been confirmed there. It has continued with Mr. Romney's efforts to loop into his campaign now one of the Americans killed in that attack as a sort of unwilling political surrogate after he's died. The man's friends and family finally appeared to have put a stop to that today. But the effort to politicize this attack, to get partisan advantage out of this attack on an American interest, and the death of 4 Americans abroad, is also happening now in Washington, where a congressman who is a Romney surrogate, Utah's Jason Chaffetz, convened this hearing today in Washington. The House is not actually even in session right now, but Jason Chaffetz of Utah says he had to step in to ensure more security in Benghazi, more resources for diplomatic missions.
I believe, personally, with more assets, more resources, just meeting the minimum standards, we could have and should have saved the life of Ambassador Stevens and the other people that were there.
Republican Congressman Jason Chaffetz speaking at this hearing today. You should also note that this is Jason Chaffetz, the same guy, speaking in an interview today on CNN. Watch.
Is it true that you voted to cut the funding for embassy security?
Absolutely. Look, we have to make priorities and choices in this country. We have, think about this, 15,000 contractors in Iraq. We have more than 6,000 contractors, a private army there for President Obama in Baghdad. And we're talking about, can we get 24 or so people into Libya to help protect our forces? When you're in tough economic times, you have to make difficult choices.
Okay,
you have to prioritize things.
So you're prioritizing. So when there are complaints that in fact that there was not enough security, you've just said absolutely that you cut. You were the one to vote against, to increase security for the State Department, which would lead directly to Benghazi. That seems like you're saying you have a hand in the responsibility to this, right? The funding of the security, if you're happy to cut it?
You get it. But because there are literally close to 200 embassies, consulates, those types of things. You have thousands of people that are involved in this. You have to prioritize things.
And he voted to cut it. What the CNN anchor Soledad O'Brien is referring to there is that House Republicans, including Mr. Chaffetz, cut the administration's request for embassy security funding by $128 million last year and $331 million this year. That was over and above the objections of the Secretary of State, Hillary Clinton, who warned that the Republicans' proposed cuts would be detrimental to America's national security. Republicans said, nah, they didn't mind. They would not. They did not think those things would hurt national security. And now, 27 days before the election, they are holding grandstanding hearings about under-resourced security where there ended up being an attack. On any given day, politics has an ick factor, right? This is grosser than usual.